The divorce papers landed on my kitchen counter with a thud that echoed through my empty apartment. How did one night of dancing lead to this? How did my search for a little fun and attention end with legal documents that would change everything? And how can I still call Caleb the villain when everyone can see the final result? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The bass pounded through the downtown nightclub as I adjusted my dress for the third time. At 32, I felt like I was finally living again. The past few months had been suffocating. Work, home, Caleb's silent dinners, repeat. Tonight was different. Tonight was mine. "Ottilie, you look amazing," Rafa shouted over the music, his hand finding the small of my back as we pushed through the crowd. At 29, the club promoter had this magnetic energy that drew people in. He made me feel alive in ways my husband hadn't in years. The dance floor called to me like a siren song. Bodies moved in perfect rhythm, lost in the moment, free from judgment. This was what I'd been missing. The validation, the attention, the feeling of being desired. "Your husband coming tonight?" Rafa asked, his breath warm against my ear. I glanced toward the bar where Caleb sat nursing a beer, his methodical nature evident even in how he peeled the label off the bottle in perfect strips. At 35, he'd grown so predictable, so withdrawn. "He's here, but he doesn't dance. Never has." Rafa's grin widened. "His loss." The music shifted to something deeper, more primal. Without thinking, I grabbed Rafa's hand and pulled him onto the dance floor. The crowd parted around us as we found our rhythm. His hand settled on my hips as I pressed back against him, letting the music guide my movements. This was freedom. This was living. I could feel eyes on us, some approving, others shocked. I didn't care. For the first time in months, I felt powerful, desired, alive. My body moved against Rafa's with increasing intensity, our dance becoming more intimate with each beat. "Everyone's watching," he whispered, his lips brushing my neck. "Good," I breathed back. "Let them watch." Through the strobing lights, I caught glimpses of Caleb at the bar. His face remained impassive, but his knuckles were white around his beer bottle. Part of me wanted him to react, to show some emotion, to prove he still cared enough to be jealous. The song seemed to last forever as Rafa and I moved together, our bodies in perfect sync. Other dancers formed a circle around us, phones appearing to capture the moment. I should have cared about being recorded. I should have thought about consequences. Instead, I arched my back and let Rafa's hands guide me through moves that would have made a stripper blush. "Ottilie's finally letting loose," I heard someone shout. My coworker Nate appeared at the edge of the circle, his phone held high, grinning like he was watching the show of the century. When the song ended, I was breathless, exhilarated, and completely addicted to the rush. The crowd cheered as Rafa spun me around, his hands lingering on my waist longer than necessary. "That was incredible," he said, his dark eyes intense. "You're incredible." My sister Lydia appeared beside us, her expression a mix of concern and embarrassment. At 34, she'd always been the responsible one, the voice of reason I rarely wanted to hear. "Ottilie, maybe we should grab some water," she suggested, her eyes darting toward the bar where Caleb still sat. "I'm fine," I laughed, still high from the performance. "Better than fine. I'm alive." Nate pushed through the crowd, his phone still recording. "Girl, you need to see this. You're about to be famous." He showed me the screen where our dance was already playing back, the video crystal clear despite the dim lighting. "Post it," I said without hesitation. "I want everyone to see." Lydia's hand touched my arm. "Ottilie, think about this. Think about Caleb." I glanced back at the bar, but Caleb was gone. His empty beer bottle sat abandoned, the label completely removed in neat, precise strips. So, typically him, even his nervous habits were methodical. He's probably in the bathroom, I said, though something cold settled in my stomach. He knew what kind of night this was going to be. But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't true. Caleb had come because I'd begged him to, promising it would be fun for both of us. He'd worn his best shirt, the blue one I'd bought him for our anniversary. He'd tried, in his quiet way. Rafa ordered another round of drinks, and I pushed the guilt away. This was my night, my moment. I deserved to feel wanted, to feel alive. If Caleb couldn't handle seeing his wife have fun, that was his problem. The video went live on my social media within minutes. Comments started pouring in immediately. Fire emojis, applause, a few raised eyebrows from family members. I basked in every notification, every like, every share. "You're trending locally," Nate announced, showing me his phone. "Look at all these shares." I felt like a celebrity. After years of being invisible, of being taken for granted, the world was finally seeing me. The real me. The fun, sexy, confident woman I'd buried under years of routine and responsibility. We stayed until last call, dancing, drinking, soaking up the attention. Rafa's hand seemed to find excuses to touch me throughout the night, adjusting my hair, guiding me through the crowd, his palm warm against my back. It felt dangerous and thrilling. When we finally stumbled out into the cool night air, Caleb was waiting by his car. He looked small somehow, diminished. His shoulders were set in that way that meant he was hurt but trying to hide it. "Ready to go home?" he asked quietly, his voice barely audible over the street noise. "I can get a ride with Rafa," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "You don't have to wait for me." Something flickered across Caleb's face. Pain, maybe, or disappointment. But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "I'll wait," he said simply. "I'm your husband." The ride home was silent except for the hum of the engine and the occasional ping of notifications from my phone. I scrolled through the comments, likes, and shares, each one feeding the high I was still riding. At home, Caleb headed straight for the guest room. He'd been sleeping there more often lately, claiming I tossed and turned too much. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt final. "Caleb," I called after him, suddenly needing to explain, to justify what he'd seen. He paused in the doorway, his back still to me. "It's late, Ottilie. We should sleep." "It was just dancing," I said to his retreating figure. "Just harmless fun." He didn't respond, but I heard the guest room door close, with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a slam. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a freight train. My phone had been buzzing all weekend with notifications, and I'd spent most of Sunday basking in my newfound internet fame. The video had over 10,000 views locally, and the comments ranged from supportive to scandalous. At the office, I felt like a different person. Gone was the invisible administrator who filed papers and answered phones. I was now the woman everyone was talking about. "Ottilie!" Nate practically bounced over to my desk, coffee in hand and gossip ready to spill. "Girl, you are the talk of the entire downtown scene. My friend Marcus said 3 different clubs want to book you for their promotional events." I preened under the attention. "Really? I mean, I was just having fun." "Fun? That was art. Pure, sexy art." He leaned against my desk conspiratorially. "So, what did Caleb say when you got home?" The question punctured my good mood slightly. Caleb had been gone when I woke up, his coffee cup already washed and put away, his side of the guest bed made with military precision. He'd left a note saying he had early meetings and would be home late. "He's fine with it," I lied smoothly. "He knows I need to express myself." But even as I said it, I remembered the look on his face in the club parking lot. The way he'd gripped the steering wheel during our silent drive home. The careful distance he'd maintained all weekend. My manager, Priya, appeared at my cubicle around 10. Her expression was professional but strained. "Ottilie, could I see you in my office for a moment?" The walk to her office felt longer than usual. Through the glass walls, I could see other employees glancing my way. some with amusement, others with barely concealed judgment. "Please sit down," Priya said, closing the door behind us. She was in her 40s, professional but fair, and had always treated me well. "I wanted to talk to you about the weekend." My stomach clenched. "What about it?" "I'm sure you're aware that a video of you has been circulating on social media. Several employees have brought it to my attention." She pulled out her phone and showed me my own dance, playing on her screen. "While what you do in your personal time is your business, when it reflects on our company's professional image, it becomes mine." "I wasn't representing the company," I said defensively. "I was just dancing." "Totally. Your social media profiles list our company as your employer. When clients or potential business partners see this," she gestured to the phone where I was grinding against Rafa in high definition, "it affects how they view our organization." Heat rose in my cheeks. "So I'm supposed to be a nun because I work in an office?" "Of course not. But there's a difference between having fun and—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "This level of public display. I need you to consider removing the video and perhaps adjusting your social media presence to be more professional." I wanted to argue, to defend my right to live my life, but Priya's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. "Fine," I muttered. "I'll think about it." Back at my desk, I stared at the video on my phone. Over 15,000 views now. The comments were a mix of fire emojis and judgment, but the attention was intoxicating. Delete this? Delete my moment of fame, my proof that I was still desirable, still alive. My phone buzzed with a text from Rafa. "Lunch today? Want to discuss some opportunities that came up from Saturday night." I typed back quickly, "Yes. Where?" "That new place on 5th Street. Noon. Can't wait to see you again." The rest of the morning dragged by. Every time someone walked past my desk, I wondered if they'd seen the video, if they were judging me or envying me. The attention was addictive, even when it came with whispers and sideways glances. At lunch, Rafa was waiting at a corner table, looking effortlessly cool in his designer jeans and fitted shirt. He stood to hug me, his embrace lasting just a moment too long to be purely friendly. "You look amazing," he said, his eyes appreciating my outfit, a dress I'd chosen specifically because it hugged my curves. "How are you handling your newfound fame?" "It's been interesting," I admitted, sliding into the booth across from him. Work wasn't thrilled. "Screw work," he said dismissively. "You're an artist, Ottilie. What we did Saturday night was pure expression. Don't let anyone dim your light." His words were exactly what I needed to hear. Here was someone who understood, who appreciated what I'd done instead of making me feel ashamed. "I had 3 club promoters call me about you," he continued. "They want to book you for events. Good money too. You could quit that boring office job and really live." The idea sent a thrill through me. "Really? They want to pay me to dance? To be yourself, to be the confident, sexy woman you showed the world Saturday night?" His hand reached across the table to touch mine. "You're wasted in that office, filing papers and answering phones. You're meant for bigger things." We talked for over an hour about possibilities, about the freedom that came with being true to yourself, about not letting other people's insecurities hold you back. By the time I returned to work, I was floating on clouds again. That evening, I got home before Caleb for once. I'd stopped by the store and bought ingredients for his favorite dinner, maybe a peace offering, maybe just guilt. Either way, I wanted to show him that I could still be a good wife while also being my own person. He arrived home at 7, looking tired. His usual greeting kiss on my cheek felt perfunctory, distant. "I made your favorite," I announced cheerfully, gesturing to the dining room where I'd set the table with our good dishes. "Thank you," he said quietly, hanging his jacket in the closet with his typical precision. "That was thoughtful." During dinner, I chatted about my day, carefully editing out the lunch with Rafa and the job offers. Caleb listened politely, making appropriate responses, but something was different. He seemed to be studying me, cataloguing my words and expressions in that methodical way of his. "How was your day?" I finally asked. "Productive," he said, cutting his chicken into precise, equal pieces. "I had some interesting conversations." "About what?" "Work, life, priorities." His tone was neutral, but there was something underneath it I couldn't identify. "I've been thinking about a lot of things lately." After dinner, I noticed him in his home office, door slightly ajar. He was writing in a notebook, his movements deliberate and focused. When I peeked in, I could see he was making some kind of list or chart, but he noticed me watching and quietly closed the notebook. "Just work stuff," he said, but he moved to block my view of his desk. That night, he went to the guest room again without explanation. I lay in our empty king-size bed, scrolling through the comments on my video, trying to recapture the high from the weekend. But Caleb's strange behavior nagged at me. When I finally drifted off to sleep, I dreamed of dancing, of crowds cheering, of being the center of attention. But in the dream, Caleb stood at the edge of the crowd, taking notes in his little notebook, his face unreadable. I woke up with the unsettling feeling that something was shifting in my carefully constructed world, but I pushed the feeling away. I was finally living my life on my terms. Whatever Caleb was planning, whatever anyone thought, I wasn't going back to being invisible. The next few weeks fell into a strange rhythm. I'd wake up to an empty house. Caleb had started leaving for work earlier and earlier. I'd spend my days fielding comments about the video, which had now reached over 25,000 views, and my evenings either out with Rafa and his crowd or alone while Caleb worked late. Our conversations became increasingly surface level. Weather, work schedules, who would pick up groceries. We moved around each other like polite strangers sharing space, but I was thriving in other ways. The club appearances Rafa had arranged were bringing in decent money, and the attention was intoxicating. I felt more alive than I had in years. It was a Thursday evening when everything started to unravel. I'd come home from another promotional event, still buzzing from the crowd's energy, to find Caleb in the kitchen making tea. It was almost midnight, but he was fully dressed, not even in his usual evening clothes. "You're up late," I said, kicking off my heels and immediately feeling the relief in my feet. "Couldn't sleep," he replied without looking up from his mug. "How was your evening?" There was something in his tone, not accusatory, not angry, but something that made my skin prickle with unease. "Fine, good crowd at the Velvet Room, made decent money." I waited for his reaction, but he just nodded as if I'd told him about a normal day at the office. "That's good," he said. "Financial independence is important." I studied his profile as he sipped his tea. "Caleb, are we okay?" Finally, he looked at me directly. His eyes held an expression I'd never seen before. Not hurt, not angry, but something calculating and distant. "Are we?" he asked back. "What do you think?" "I think you're being weird and passive-aggressive," I snapped, frustration bubbling over. "If you have something to say, just say it." "I'm not being passive-aggressive, Tilly. I'm being observant." He set down his mug with careful precision. "I'm watching my wife build a life that doesn't include me, and I'm trying to figure out what that means for our marriage." "That's not what I'm doing," I protested. "I'm just finally doing something for myself. After years of being invisible, of being taken for granted, I'm actually living." "Taken for granted?" His eyebrows rose slightly. "Is that how you see our marriage?" "I see a marriage where I do everything, the cooking, the cleaning, the social planning, while you work and come home and expect everything to be perfect. When's the last time you told me I looked beautiful? When's the last time you made me feel desired?" Something flickered across his face. "When's the last time you gave me the chance?" The question hung between us like a challenge. I wanted to argue, to list all the ways he'd failed as a husband, but something in his calm demeanor stopped me. "I'm going to bed," I said instead, "in our bedroom. You can join me or not." He didn't join me. The next morning, I woke to find a note on the kitchen counter. Gone to my mother's for the weekend. Need to think. C. My first emotion was relief. A whole weekend without his judgmental presence, without having to explain myself or defend my choices. I could do whatever I wanted without his disapproving silence. I called Rafa immediately. "Free weekend," I announced when he picked up. "Want to make it memorable?" His laugh was warm and inviting. "Always. I know exactly what we should do." That evening found us at another club, this one upscale and exclusive. Rafa had gotten us VIP treatment, and I felt like a celebrity as we were escorted to a private section overlooking the dance floor. "You look incredible tonight," he murmured, his hand resting on my thigh as we sat in the plush booth. "That dress is perfect on you." I'd chosen it specifically for the way it made me feel. Powerful, sexy, confident. The black material hugged every curve, and the neckline was just low enough to be daring. "I feel incredible," I replied, leaning closer to him. Free is a good look on you." As the night progressed, we danced, we drank, we laughed. Other people joined our group, friends of Rafa's, other club regulars, people who knew how to have fun without judgment. I felt like I belonged here, like this was my world. Around midnight, someone suggested we take the party to the rooftop bar across the street. The entire group migrated, and I found myself once again the center of attention as we commandeered a section of the outdoor space. "Dance for us, Ottilie," someone called out, and before I knew it, I was moving to the music streaming from someone's phone, the city lights providing a perfect backdrop. This time, I didn't just dance with Rafa. I moved between different partners, letting the music and the alcohol guide me through increasingly bold moves. Phones appeared again, capturing every moment, and I reveled in it. I was in the middle of a particularly intimate dance with Rafa when my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "Interesting evening. You should look at yourself from the outside sometime." The message sobered me instantly. I looked around the rooftop, scanning the faces in the crowd, but everyone seemed to be enjoying the show. Who had sent it? "What's wrong?" Rafa asked, noticing my sudden tension. "Nothing," I lied, shoving the phone back in my purse. "Just work stuff." But the moment was broken. For the rest of the night, I felt like I was being watched, studied. Every time I looked around, though, I saw only admiring faces and recording phones. Sunday evening, I returned home to find Caleb already there, sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread out in front of him. He looked up when I entered, and I was struck again by that calculating expression. "How was your weekend?" he asked politely. "Fine. Good. How was your mother's?" Enlightening. He gathered the papers into a neat stack. We had some interesting conversations about marriage, commitment, and self-respect. I bristled at the implication. "I hope you didn't bore her with complaints about your wife having fun." Actually, we talked about a lot of things. Practical things. He stood up, papers in hand. "I'll be in my office if you need anything." "Caleb, wait." Something in his demeanor was setting off alarm bells. "What kind of practical things?" He paused in the doorway, not turning around. The kind of things a person needs to consider when their life situation changes unexpectedly. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the weekend, the strange text message, Caleb's odd behavior. Part of me wanted to go to the guest room, to try to bridge whatever gap was growing between us. But a larger part of me was angry that I should have to apologize for finally living my life. I was just drifting off to sleep when I heard sounds from Caleb's office. The printer running, papers shuffling, quiet phone conversations. It went on for hours. In the morning, he was gone again before I woke up, but I noticed something different. Various items around the house had small labels on them. Not obvious ones, but tiny stickers in corners and edges. The television had one. The coffee maker. Even some of my jewelry had nearly invisible marks. When I tried to ask him about it that evening, he just said he was organizing and taking inventory. The word inventory sent a chill down my spine, though I couldn't say exactly why. 3 weeks later, I was living a double life that felt more natural than my marriage ever had. Days at the office were tedious but tolerable. Evenings were spent either at clubs and events with Rafa's crowd or at home in increasingly tense silence with Caleb. My sister Lydia had been trying to get me to meet for lunch for weeks, and I'd been avoiding her calls. I knew what she wanted to discuss, and I wasn't in the mood for another lecture about responsibility and marriage, but she was persistent and finally cornered me at work. "Oatly, we need to talk," she said, appearing at my desk during my lunch break. Now. The cafe she chose was quiet, the kind of place where serious conversations happened. Lydia looked tired, older somehow, and I realized I hadn't really looked at her, really seen her, in months. "I'm worried about you," she said without preamble once we'd ordered. "Everyone's worried about you." Everyone meaning who? Mom, Dad, Caleb's mother, Caleb. She leaned forward across the small table. "Oatly, what are you doing?" "I'm living my life," I said defensively. "For the first time in years, I'm actually happy." "You're having an affair." The words hit like a slap. "I am not." "You're spending every weekend with another man, dancing like that, posting videos that make you look." She struggled for words. "This isn't you, Oatly." "Maybe the person you knew wasn't really me," I shot back. "Maybe I was just playing a role, being what everyone expected me to be." "And what about Caleb? What about your marriage? What about it? When's the last time he fought for me? When's the last time he showed any passion, any emotion about anything? I could disappear tomorrow and he'd probably just reorganize his filing system." Lydia stared at me for a long moment. "He came to see me last week." That stopped me cold. "What?" "He came to my house. We talked for 3 hours." Her expression was sad, disappointed. "Oatly, he loves you. He's heartbroken. He has a funny way of showing it. He showed me things. Evidence." The word made my stomach clench. "Photos, videos, receipts, timelines. He's been documenting everything." "Documenting what?" "Your affair, your public behavior, the money you've been making dancing at clubs, the nights you don't come home until dawn." She pulled out her phone and showed me a folder of screenshots. "He has everything, Oatly. Everything." I stared at the phone screen, seeing myself through Caleb's methodical documentation, timestamps, locations, financial records. It was all there, organized with the same precision he brought to everything else. "He's building a case," Lydia continued quietly. "A legal case." "For what?" "Divorce." The word hung between us like a death sentence. I'd known, somewhere deep down, that we were heading toward this moment, but seeing it laid out so clinically, so thoroughly, made it real in a way that terrified me. "He can't prove anything," I said weakly. "He doesn't have to prove an affair, Oatly. No-fault divorce, remember. But he can prove abandonment of marriage, financial irresponsibility, public humiliation." She scrolled through more screenshots. "He has witnesses, video evidence, financial records showing money you've hidden from him." "I haven't hidden anything." "The cash payments from the clubs, the separate account you opened, the credit card he doesn't know about." Her voice was getting sharper. "I've seen the paperwork, Oatly. He knows everything." I felt like the walls were closing in. "So what does he want? What's his endgame?" "He wants his dignity back, and he wants out of a marriage where his wife publicly humiliates him while carrying on with another man." "I'm not carrying on with anyone." "Aren't you?" Lydia's tone was flat, disappointed. "When's the last time you came home before midnight? When's the last time you had dinner with your husband? When's the last time you acted like you were married to anyone other than Rafa?" The truth of her words hit harder than any accusation. I tried to remember the last time Caleb and I had had a real conversation. The last time we'd shared a meal. The last time we'd slept in the same bed. It had been months. "He's giving you one chance," Lydia continued. Stop seeing Rafa, stop the club appearances. Delete the videos and social media accounts. Go to marriage counseling with him. And if I don't, then he files the papers he's already had drawn up, and you find out what a really methodical person can do when they're done being patient. That evening, I sat in my car in our driveway for 20 minutes, staring at the house Caleb and I had bought together 5 years ago. It looked the same from the outside, but I knew everything had changed. Inside, I found him in the kitchen, making dinner for one. He looked up when I entered, and I saw something different in his expression. Not the calculating look from recent weeks, but something sadder and more final. Lydia told me about your conversation, I said. He nodded, continuing to stir whatever was in the pan. I figured she would. Is it true? About the divorce papers? Yes. The simple honesty of his answer was somehow worse than any argument would have been. Caleb, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work it out. He turned off the burner and faced me fully. Can we? Can you honestly tell me you want to fix this? I opened my mouth to say yes, but the words wouldn't come, because the truth was, I didn't know if I wanted to fix it. I didn't know if I wanted to go back to being invisible, to being taken for granted, to being the woman I'd been before I discovered who I could be. I thought so, he said quietly. Ottilie, I loved you. I still love the woman I married. But that woman is gone, and the person you've become, she doesn't want to be married to me. That's not true. Isn't it? When's the last time you chose me over Rafa? When's the last time you came home because you wanted to be here with me, not because you had nowhere else to go? I couldn't answer because we both knew the truth. I'm not going to fight for someone who doesn't want to be fought for, he said. I'm not going to compete with a lifestyle that makes you happier than our marriage ever did. So that's it. You're just giving up. I'm accepting reality. He moved to leave the kitchen, then paused. The papers will be filed Monday. You'll be served Tuesday morning. I suggest you get a lawyer. That night, I called Rafa and told him everything. He was sympathetic, supportive, and encouraging. You're better off without him, he said. He was holding you back anyway. Now you can really be free. But as I hung up the phone, I realized that freedom felt a lot lonelier than I'd expected it to. The process server arrived at exactly 9:47 a.m. on Tuesday morning. I know the exact time because I was staring at the clock, dreading this moment while simultaneously trying to convince myself it wasn't really happening. The woman was professional, but not unkind as she handed me the thick envelope. Ottilie Vane, you're being served with divorce papers. Have a good day. I stood in my doorway in my bathrobe, holding the envelope like it might explode. Neighbors were leaving for work, kids were waiting for school buses. Life was continuing normally while mine was falling apart. Inside, the papers were exactly what Lydia had warned me about. Caleb hadn't just filed for divorce. He'd filed for divorce with a comprehensive case that laid out every detail of the past 6 months. Photos from clubs, timestamps from social media posts, financial records showing the money I'd earned and hidden, witness statements from people I thought were friends. But the most devastating part was a simple timeline he'd created, showing the deterioration of our marriage alongside the escalation of my relationship with Rafa. Date by date, incident by incident, he'd documented how I'd chosen my new life over our marriage. The worst part, I couldn't argue with any of it. My phone rang. Caleb's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I thought he was calling to talk, to work things out, to tell me this was all a mistake. I assume you've received the papers, he said without preamble. Caleb, please, we can still fix this. No, Ottilie, we can't. His voice was calm, final. I'm calling to let you know that I've moved out. I took only what was mine, and I've left a list of shared assets that will need to be divided. Moved out? When? Yesterday while you were at work. My clothes, my personal items, my office equipment, everything else we can sort out through lawyers. I looked around the house, and noticed for the first time what was missing. His coffee mug wasn't in the sink. His jacket wasn't on the hook by the door. The small personal touches that had made this place ours were gone. "Where are you staying?" "That's not really your concern anymore." His tone wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. "My lawyer will be in touch about the asset division and timeline." "Caleb, wait." But he'd already hung up. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, reading and rereading the divorce papers, trying to understand how we'd gotten here. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. I looked like exactly what I was, a wife who'd abandoned her marriage for excitement and validation. That evening, I met Rafa at our usual spot. I needed comfort, support, someone to tell me I'd done nothing wrong. "So he actually went through with it," Rafa said, scanning the papers I'd brought. "Damn, he's thorough." "What am I going to do?" "Fight it. Get a good lawyer. Make him prove his case." "Rafa, look at these photos. Look at this timeline. What's to fight? It's all true." He shrugged, seemingly unbothered by the legal documentation of our relationship. "So you had some fun. So you finally lived a little. That doesn't make you a bad person." But looking at the evidence through legal eyes, I realized it kind of did make me a bad wife. Maybe not a bad person, but definitely a bad wife. "I need to call Lydia," I said, gathering up the papers. "Why?" "So she can lecture you some more about responsibility in marriage." Rafa's tone was dismissive. "Ottilie, you don't need people who don't support your happiness." Something in his words bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on what. At home that night, the house felt enormous and empty. I'd grown accustomed to Caleb's quiet presence, his methodical routines, the way he'd leave his reading glasses on the coffee table or his coffee cup in the sink. Without those small signs of shared life, the place felt like a museum. I called Lydia. "I got served today," I said when she answered. "I know. Caleb called me." "You're talking to him now?" "Ottilie, he's family too. He's been part of our family for 7 years." Her tone was gentle but firm. "And honestly, after seeing what he's been going through, I understand why he did this." "So you're taking his side?" "I'm not taking sides. I'm acknowledging reality. You left your marriage, Ottilie. Maybe not physically, but emotionally, mentally, practically. You left. Caleb is just making it official." "I was trying to find myself." "You were having an affair and calling it self-discovery." The bluntness of her words hit like a physical blow. "I never slept with Rafa." "Does it matter? You gave him everything else. Your time, your attention, your emotional energy, your physical affection. What exactly did you say for your husband?" I tried to answer but couldn't, because she was right. I'd given Rafa everything that mattered, while giving Caleb only leftover scraps of my time and attention. "The Ottilie I grew up with would never have done this," Lydia continued. "She would never have humiliated someone she loved, never would have broken promises, never would have been so selfish. People change. Yes, they do. And sometimes they change into people their families don't recognize or respect." The line went quiet for a long moment. "I love you, Ottilie. You're my sister, and I'll always love you. But I can't support what you've done, and I can't pretend that Caleb is the villain here." After she hung up, I sat in my empty house and tried to figure out when I'd become the kind of person my own sister couldn't support. When had I become someone who destroyed her marriage and then played the victim? The answer was uncomfortable but clear. Gradually, one choice at a time, one justification at a time, one dance at a time. I'd told myself I was finding myself, but really, I'd just been running away from responsibility and commitment. I'd told myself I deserved happiness, but I'd pursued it at the expense of someone who'd loved me. Looking at Caleb's methodical documentation, I realized he'd been trying to save our marriage long before I'd even admitted it was in trouble. The spreadsheets, the notes, the careful tracking, it wasn't controlling or obsessive. It was the desperate attempt of a methodical man to understand what was happening to his wife and his marriage, and I'd laughed at him for it. 6 weeks later, I stood outside the courthouse holding the finalized divorce decree. The process had been surprisingly quick once I'd stopped fighting it. My lawyer had taken one look at Caleb's evidence and advised me to accept his terms, which were more generous than I deserved. He'd kept the house, but taken on all the debt. I got my car, half the savings, and my freedom. No alimony requested, no bitter custody battles over possessions, no public mudslinging. Even in divorce, Caleb had been methodical and fair. I hadn't seen him during the proceedings. Our lawyers had handled everything, communicating through official channels and legal documents. But I knew he was inside the courthouse somewhere, probably filing his copies with the same precision he brought to everything else. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was finally free to be with Rafa, but the relationship had started souring the moment my marriage ended. Without the excitement of secrecy, without the thrill of rebellion, our connection had proven to be built on nothing more substantial than good music and mutual attraction. He'd started cancelling plans, taking longer to return texts, finding excuses to avoid spending time together. The club appearances had dried up too. Apparently, a divorced woman grinding on strangers wasn't as marketable as a married woman doing it. I was standing on the courthouse steps, trying to figure out what came next, when I saw him. Caleb emerged from the building looking different somehow. Not just the new haircut, or the clothes I didn't recognize, but something in his posture, his expression. He looked lighter, unburdened. He saw me at the same moment I saw him, and for a second we just stared at each other across the space that used to hold our marriage. Then he walked over. Ottilie, his voice was neutral, polite. Caleb, I clutched the divorce papers tighter. So it's done. Yes, it's done. We stood in awkward silence for a moment. There was so much I wanted to say, apologies, explanations, justifications, but looking at his face, I realized none of it mattered anymore. I'm sorry, I said finally, for all of it, for what I put you through. He nodded slowly. I know you are. And I'm sorry too. For what? For not fighting harder, for letting you go so easily. He paused. But mostly I'm sorry that you felt like you needed to destroy our marriage to find yourself. I don't know what I was thinking. You were thinking that you deserved to be happy, and you do deserve that, Ottilie, just not at someone else's expense. The simple truth of his words made my eyes burn with tears I'd been holding back for weeks. What happens now? I asked. Now you get to find out who you really are when you're not rebelling against anything. His expression softened slightly. I hope she's someone you can respect. And you? I get to remember what it feels like to have dignity. He looked back at the courthouse, then at me. You made it public, Ottilie. All of it. The dancing, the affair, the humiliation. You put our private business on display for the world to see. I started to protest that it wasn't an affair, but he held up a hand. So I made it official. Legal. Clean. He held up his own copy of the divorce papers. You wanted everyone to see you dancing with another man while your husband watched. Now everyone can see that your husband had enough self-respect to walk away. The words weren't cruel, but they hit harder than any anger would have, because he was right. I'd made a spectacle of our marriage's destruction, and he'd simply documented it legally. I hope you find what you're looking for, he said, and I could tell he meant it. I hope the person you become is worth what you gave up to find her. Then he walked away, and I watched him go. He didn't look back. Standing there on the courthouse steps, holding the papers that officially ended my marriage, I realized that I'd gotten exactly what I'd been asking for. Freedom, independence, the right to live my life without anyone's approval or judgment. So, why did it feel so much like losing? My phone buzzed with a text from Rafa. Can't make dinner tonight. Rain check. I stared at the message, then deleted his number. That evening I sat in my new apartment, a small place across town that I could afford on my office salary, and looked through the photos on my phone. Hundreds of pictures from clubs and parties, videos of me dancing, screenshots of comments and likes and shares. In every single image, I was performing. Smiling for cameras, posing for approval, moving my body for validation from strangers. I looked happy in the photos, but I couldn't remember actually feeling happy in any of those moments. I'd been too busy seeking the next high, the next rush of attention. I found one photo from before everything changed, Caleb and me at Lydia's birthday party 2 years ago. We were sitting together on her couch, not posing, not performing. I was leaning against his shoulder while he showed me something on his phone, both of us laughing at whatever it was. I looked genuinely happy in that photo. Content. At peace. I'd traded that peace for excitement, that contentment for validation, that quiet happiness for the temporary high of being desired by strangers. And now I had neither. 3 months later, I ran into Nate at a coffee shop. He'd been one of my biggest cheerleaders during my club days, always encouraging me to live my best life and not worry about what anyone thought. "Oatly, how are you doing?" He seemed genuinely happy to see me. "I'm okay, getting by." "I heard about the divorce. I'm sorry it didn't work out." "Thanks." "But hey, at least now you're free to really live, right? No more judgmental husband holding you back." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized he had no idea what I'd actually lost. To him, my marriage had been an obstacle to overcome, not a relationship I'd destroyed through selfishness and poor choices. "Actually," I said slowly, "I think my judgmental husband was the only person who loved me enough to put up with my behavior for as long as he did." Nate looked confused. "But you're so much happier now, right? You were miserable before." "Was I? Or was I just bored?" I left him standing there looking puzzled and walked home to my empty apartment. That night, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I deleted my social media accounts. All of them. The videos, the photos, the comments, the validation. All of it gone with a few clicks. Then I sat in the silence of my apartment and tried to remember who I'd been before I'd needed the approval of strangers to feel alive. It was going to take a while to find her again. But for the first time since this whole mess started, I was more interested in becoming someone I could respect than someone others would desire. Caleb had been right about one thing. I'd made our private business public, turned our marriage into a performance, our problems into entertainment. He'd simply made it official by walking away with his dignity intact while I was left holding the pieces of a life I'd shattered for temporary thrills. The dance was over, the music had stopped, and I was finally ready to learn how to live without an audience.